Chapter 3. What happened then is scarcely to be described in words. It is full of those paradoxes, contradictions, and anomalies which have no place in waking life, but which fill our more fantastic dreams, and are taken as matters of course till we return to our narrow, rigid, objective world of limited causation and tridimensional logic. As the Hindu continued his tale, he had difficulty in avoiding what seemed, even more than the notion of a man transferred through the years to boyhood, an air of trivial, puerile extravagance. Mr. Aspinwall, in disgust, gave an apoplectic snort and virtually stopped listening. For the rite of the silver key, as practiced by Randolph Carter in that black, haunted cave within a cave, did not prove unavailing. From the first gesture and syllable an aura of strange, awesome mutation was apparent. A sense of incalculable disturbance and confusion in time and space, yet one which held no hint of what we recognize as motion and duration. Imperceptibly, such things as age and location ceased to have any significance whatever. The day before, Randolph Carter had miraculously leaped a gulf of years. Now there was no distinction between boy and man. There was only the entity Randolph Carter, with a certain store of images which had lost all connection with terrestrial scenes and circumstances of acquisition. A moment before, there had been an inner cave with vague suggestions of a monstrous arch and gigantic sculptured hand on the farther wall. Now there was neither cave nor absence of cave, neither wall nor absence of wall. There was only a flux of impressions not so much visual as cerebral, amidst which the entity that was Randolph Carter experienced perceptions or registrations of all that his mind revolved on, yet without any clear consciousness of the way in which he received them. By the time the rite was over, Carter knew that he was in no region whose place could be told by Earth's geographers, and in no age whose date history could fix. For the nature of what was happening was not wholly unfamiliar to him. There were hints of it in the cryptical Nakadic fragments, and a whole chapter in the forbidden Necronomicon of the mad Arab Abdul al-Hazard had taken on significance when he had deciphered the designs graven on the silver key. A gate had been unlocked. Not indeed the ultimate gate, but one leading from earth and time to that extension of earth which is outside time, and from which in turn the ultimate gate leads fearsomely and perilously to the last void which is outside all earths, all universes, and all matter. There would be a guide. And a very terrible one, a guide who had been an entity of earth millions of years before, when man was undreamed of, and when forgotten shapes moved on a steaming planet building strange cities among whose last, crumbling ruins the earliest mammals were to play. Carter remembered what the monstrous Necronomicon had vaguely and disconcertingly adumbrated concerning that guide.
And while there are those,
the mad Arab had written,
who have dared to seek glimpses beyond the veil, and to accept him as a guide, they would have been more prudent had they avoided commerce with him, for it is written in the book of Thoth, how terrific is the price of a single glimpse. Nor may those who pass ever return, for in the vastnesses transcending our world are shapes of darkness that seize and bind. The affair that shambleth about in the night, the evil that defieth the elder sign, the herd that stand watch at the secret portal each tomb is known to have, and that thrive on that which groweth out of the tenants within, all these blacknesses are lesser than he who guardeth the gateway, he who will guide the rash one beyond all the worlds into the abyss of unnameable devourers. For he is, at Tawil, the most ancient one, which the scribe rendereth as the prolonged of life.
Memory and imagination shaped dim half-pictures with uncertain outlines amidst the seething chaos, but Carter knew that they were of memory and imagination only. Yet he felt that it was not chance which built these things in his consciousness, but rather some vast reality, ineffable and undimensioned, which surrounded him and strove to translate itself into the only symbols he was capable of grasping. For no mind of earth may grasp the extensions of shape which interweave in the oblique gulfs outside time and the dimensions we know. There floated before Carter a cloudy pageantry of shapes and scenes which he somehow linked with Earth's primal, aeon-forgotten past. Monstrous living things moved deliberately through vistas of fantastic handiwork that no sane dream ever held, and landscapes bore incredible vegetation and cliffs and mountains and masonry of no human pattern. There were cities under the sea, and denizens thereof, and towers in great deserts where globes and cylinders and nameless winged entities shot off into space or hurtled down out of space. All this Carter grasped, though the images bore no fixed relation to one another or to him. He himself had no stable form or position, but only such shifting hints of form and position as his whirling fancy supplied. He had wished to find the enchanted regions of his boyhood dreams, where galleys sail up the river Ochronos past the gilded spires of Thran, and elephant caravans tramp through perfumed jungles incled beyond forgotten palaces with veined ivory columns that sleep lovely and unbroken under the moon. Now, intoxicated with wider visions, he scarcely knew what he sought. Thoughts of infinite and blasphemous daring rose in his mind, and he knew he would face the dreaded guide without fear, asking monstrous and terrible things of him. All at once the pageant of impressions seemed to achieve a vague kind of stabilization. There were great masses of towering stone, carven into alien and incomprehensible designs and disposed according to the laws of some unknown, inverse geometry. Light filtered down from a sky of no assignable color in baffling, contradictory directions, and played almost sentiently over what seemed to be a curved line of gigantic hieroglyph pedestals more hexagonal than otherwise and surmounted by cloaked, ill-defined shapes. There was another shape, too, which occupied no pedestal, but which seemed to glide or float over the cloudy, floor-like lower level. It was not exactly permanent in outline, but held transient suggestions of something remotely preceding or paralleling the human form, though half as large again as an ordinary man. It seemed to be heavily cloaked, like the shapes on the pedestals, with some neutral-colored fabric, and Carter could not detect any eye-holes through which it might gaze. Probably it did not need to gaze, for it seemed to belong to an order of being far outside the merely physical in organization and faculties. A moment later Carter knew that this was so, for the shape had spoken to his mind without sound or language. And though the name it uttered was a dreaded and terrible one, Randolph Carter did not flinch in fear. Instead, he spoke back, equally without sound or language, and made those obeisances which the hideous Necronomicon had taught him to make. For this shape was nothing less than that which all the world has feared since Lomar rose out of the sea and the winged ones came to earth to teach the elder lore to man. It was indeed the frightful guide and guardian of the gate, Amrat Tal, the ancient one, which the scribe rendereth the prolonged of life. The guide knew, as he knew all things, of Carter's quest and coming, and that this seeker of dreams and secrets stood before him unafraid. There was no horror or malignity in what he radiated, and Carter wondered for a moment whether the mad Arab's terrific blasphemous hints, and extracts from the Book of Thoth, might not have come from envy and a baffled wish to do what was now about to be done. Or perhaps the guide reserved his horror and malignity for those who feared. As the radiations continued, Carter mentally interpreted them in the form of words.
"I am indeed that most ancient one,"
said the guide,
"of whom you know. We have awaited you, the ancient ones and I. You are welcome, even though long delayed. You have the key, and have unlocked the first gate. Now the ultimate gate is ready for your trial. If you fear, you need not advance. You may still go back unharmed the way you came. But if you choose to advance..."
The pause was ominous, but the radiations continued to be friendly. Carter hesitated not a moment, for a burning curiosity drove him on.
"I will advance,"
he radiated back.
"And I accept you as my guide."
At this reply the guide seemed to make a sign by certain motions of his robe which may or may not have involved the lifting of an arm or some homologous member. A second sign followed, and from his well-learnt lore Carter knew that he was at last very close to the ultimate gate. The light now changed to another inexplicable color, and the shapes on the quasi-hexagonal pedestals became more clearly defined. As they sat more erect, their outlines became more like those of men, though Carter knew that they could not be men. Upon their cloaked heads there now seemed to rest tall, uncertainly colored mitres, strangely suggestive of those on certain nameless figures chiseled by a forgotten sculptor along the living cliffs of a high, forbidden mountain in Tartary, while grasped in certain folds of their swathings were long scepters whose carven heads bodied forth a grotesque and archaic mystery. Carter guessed what they were, whence they came, and whom they served, and guessed, too, the price of their service. But he was still content, for at one mighty venture he was to learn all. Damnation, he reflected, is but a word bandied about by those whose blindness leads them to condemn all who can see, even with a single eye. He wondered at the vast conceit of those who had babbled of the malignant ancient ones, as if they could pause from their everlasting dreams to wreak a wrath upon mankind. As well, he thought, might a mammoth pause to visit frantic vengeance on an angleworm. Now the whole assemblage on the vaguely hexagonal pillars was greeting him with a gesture of those oddly carven scepters, and radiating a message which he understood.
We salute you, most ancient one, and you, Randolph Carter, whose daring has made you one of us.
Carter saw now that one of the pedestals was vacant, and a gesture of the most ancient one told him it was reserved for him. He saw also another pedestal, taller than the rest, and at the center of the oddly curved line, neither semicircle nor ellipse, parabola nor hyperbola, which they formed. This, he guessed, was the guide's own throne. Moving and rising in a manner hardly definable, Carter took his seat, and as he did so he saw that the guide had likewise seated himself. Gradually and mistily it became apparent that the most ancient one was holding something. Some object clutched in the outflung folds of his robe as if for the sight, or what answered for sight, of the cloaked companions. It was a large sphere or apparent sphere of some obscurely iridescent metal, and as the guide put it forward a low, pervasive half-impression of sound began to rise and fall in intervals which seemed to be rhythmic even though they followed no rhythm of earth. There was a suggestion of chanting, or what human imagination might interpret as chanting. Presently the quasi-sphere began to grow luminous, and as it gleamed up into a cold, pulsating light of unassignable color, Carter saw that its flickerings conformed to the alien rhythm of the chant. Then all the mitred, scepter-bearing shapes on the pedestals commenced a slight, curious swaying in the same inexplicable rhythm, while nimbuses of unclassifiable light, resembling that of the quasi-sphere, played round their shrouded heads. The Hindu paused in his tale and looked curiously at the tall, coffin-shaped clock with the 4 hands and hieroglyph dial, whose crazy ticking followed no known rhythm of earth.
"You, Mr. de Marigny,"
he suddenly said to his learned host,
do not need to be told the particular alien rhythm to which those cowl shapes on the hexagonal pillars chanted and nodded. You are the only one else, in America, who has had a taste of the outer extension. That clock, I suppose it was sent you by the yogi poor Harley Warren used to talk about, the seer who said that he alone of living men had been to Yan-ho, the hidden legacy of sinister, eon-old Leng, and had borne certain things away from that dreadful and forbidden city. I wonder how many of its subtler properties you know? If my dreams and readings be correct, it was made by those who knew much of the first gateway. But let me go on with my tale.
At last, continued the Swami, the swaying and the suggestion of chanting ceased, the lambent nimbuses around the now drooping and motionless heads faded away, while the cloaked shapes slumped curiously on their pedestals. The quasi-sphere, however, continued to pulsate with inexplicable light. Carter felt that the ancient ones were sleeping as they had been when he first saw them, and he wondered out of what cosmic dreams his coming had wakened them. Slowly there filtered into his mind the truth that this strange chanting ritual had been one of instruction, and that the companions had been chanted by the most ancient one into a new and peculiar kind of sleep, in order that their dreams might open the ultimate gate to which the silver key was a passport. He knew that in the profundity of this deep sleep they were contemplating unplumbed vastnesses of utter and absolute outsideness with which the earth had nothing to do, and that they were to accomplish that which his presence had demanded. The guide did not share this sleep, but seemed still to be giving instructions in some subtle, soundless way. Evidently he was implanting images of those things which he wished the companions to dream, and Carter knew that as each of the ancient ones pictured the prescribed thought, there would be born the nucleus of a manifestation visible to his own earthly eyes. When the dreams of all the shapes had achieved a oneness, that manifestation would occur, and everything he required be materialized, through concentration. He had seen such things on earth. In India, where the combined, projected will of a circle of adepts can make a thought take tangible substance, and in hoary Atlanat, of which few men dare speak. Just what the ultimate gate was, and how it was to be passed, Carter could not be certain, but a feeling of tense expectancy surged over him. He was conscious of having a kind of body, and of holding the fateful silver key in his hand. The masses of towering stone opposite him seemed to possess the evenness of a wall, toward the center of which his eyes were irresistibly drawn. And then suddenly he felt the mental currents of the most ancient one cease to flow forth. For the first time Carter realized how terrific utter silence, mental and physical, may be. The earlier moments had never failed to contain some perceptible rhythm, if only the faint, cryptical pulse of the earth's dimensional extension, but now the hush of the abyss seemed to fall upon everything. Despite his intimations of body, he had no audible breath, and the glow of Atal's quasi-sphere had grown petrifiedly fixed and unpulsating. A potent nimbus, brighter than those which had played round the heads of the shapes, blazed frozenly over the shrouded skull of the terrible guide. A dizziness assailed Carter, and his sense of lost orientation waxed 1,000-fold. The strange lights seemed to hold the quality of the most impenetrable blacknesses heaped upon blacknesses, while about the ancient ones, so close on their pseudo-hexagonal thrones, there hovered an air of the most stupefying remoteness. Then he felt himself wafted into immeasurable depths, with waves of perfumed warmth lapping against his face. It was as if he floated in a torrid, rose-tinctured sea, a sea of drugged wine whose waves broke foaming against shores of brazen fire. A great fear clutched him as he half saw that vast expanse of surging sea lapping against its far-off coast. But the moment of silence was broken. The surgings were speaking to him in a language that was not of physical sound or articulate words.
The man of truth is beyond good and evil.
Intoned a voice that was not a voice.
The man of truth has ridden to all as one. The man of truth has learnt that illusion is the only reality, and that substance is an impostor.
And now, in that rise of masonry to which his eyes had been so irresistibly drawn, there appeared the outline of a titanic arch not unlike that which he thought he had glimpsed so long ago in that cave within a cave, on the far, unreal surface of the three-dimensioned earth. He realized that he had been using the silver key, moving it in accord with an unlearnt and instinctive ritual closely akin to that which had opened the inner gate. That rose-drunken sea which lapped his cheeks was, he realized, no more or less than the adamantine mass of the solid wall yielding before his spell, and the vortex of thought with which the ancient ones had aided his spell. Still guided by instinct and blind determination, he floated forward, and through the ultimate gate.